We have made it! It is finally done. Hello, welcome back to my channel. My name is Mildly Gothic. If you are new here, what I like to do is a variety of artsy things, and today we're focusing on crochet. This is part 3, what I never thought was going to get to 3 parts, I thought maybe 2, of putting together this sweater. But look, she's here! She's done. We're going to ignore that there's still tails to weave in. That was not relevant to finishing this video, in my opinion. But the sweater is complete. I am so incredibly happy with it. I mean, this took forever to put together. I think there was a lot of really interesting things involved in doing this. So I really enjoyed this, and I'm not entirely sure what this last part is going to be, but I'm definitely happy to bring you along with me for the ride of how I put this thing together. It is something I'm going to be very proud to wear, and something that I don't think I'm ever gonna do again. But I'm really happy with it. I think it came out really well. There also is a dog cameo in this video. He does make an appearance because he's wonderful. I'm making this intro way longer than it needs to be. It's finished. I'm gonna show you how we got there, and thank you so much for watching. If you haven't seen the other parts of this video series, check them out in the card up there. The second one, I've been told, is a little bit like a therapy session, so I apologize, but it's kind of interesting. You can see how I pieced together all of the patchwork for this and how I went about thinking about that. So if you're interested, those videos are up there, but otherwise, let's get to how I finish this thing. You'd think I'd get better about figuring out what this camera angle actually should be, but like, no. So, if you can't tell, where am I going? We have a sleeve. So, I love it. I thought that I should do a granny square style stitch when I first started, but for some reason my brain went, no, that's more complicated than just doing double crochets. I don't know, maybe it is, but it also looks stupid. This looks so much better because I think the holes kind of work with this, and so while it's still a little holy, it's still more solid than this is, so it ties it in without looking so dense. And that's really what was bothering me before. So these are stripes of different sizes. So I decided to do the stripes in some different sizes, and I don't know if I'll throw it in or not. I reused the yarn that I tried for the sleeve the first time, so many of these segments are just the unraveled pieces of the yarn that I'd actually used for the sleeves, so that yarn didn't go to waste. And it's got the little cuff at the end. So what I'm going to do now is work on creating that same hole and attachment for this sleeve. So, I mean, I think that just sits so much better. It's got a little bit more looseness to it. It's got more bend. It just flows better. And I think it looks really cute. So, because I'm stubborn, we're not going to let this thing go. And I'm not going to do the sleeves differently. I think that would be a little bit too much. So I'm going to try to replicate this exactly. So I'll walk you through the basics of, if you've never done granny square, like, you know, the granny clusters before, I'll show you that. And then also I'll show you how to do a granny cluster decrease, because that's the only other thing that I did different for this sleeve. And then I'll include most of the rest of this footage is probably going to be me sitting on my couch, because that's where it's most comfortable to crochet, so that's where I'm going to live. Hi! You coming to say hi? Hello, baby. Hello. Here's the puppy. Ah. Anyways, the dog is here as always. I'm sure shark fin's in shot, but I have hope for the sleeves, so I'm going to re-explain kind of how I was attaching this together. Maybe I'll try to get a better shot of that, but let's do the second one. So the very first thing I did was pin everything in some kind of relative place, because gravity is not my friend, and so things were hanging a little weirdly. And then I tried to get a slightly better shot of it this time. I'm not entirely sure how much better it was, but the entire goal was using double, half double, single, and slip stitches to try to create an even line all the way across the motifs with as many connection points as possible without overloading it with connection points. Basically wanting it to be super secure, but also wanting to kind of minimize the white if I could, just for aesthetic purposes. So once I got all the way around the sleeve, it was as simple as slip stitching back into my first stitch and then starting my first row of granny clusters. Granny clusters are simply 3 double crochets. So for the first one,
in 3 stitches, you will do a double crochet in each, then you chain 1, and then continue that pattern all the way around. So 3 double crochets in 3 stitches, chain 1, skip a stitch, 3 double crochets in the next 3 stitches. In subsequent rows, you will actually be crocheting into or through that chain 1 space. So all of your future stitches will actually be in those gaps. They will not be going into other stitches. I honestly thought that I was going to have a lot more footage as far as how I put the sleeve together, but I also very quickly realized that I did not actually do that many decreases throughout this entire project. There is maybe 1 decrease per sleeve color blocked section, so it's very much just one large tube that like kinda tapers, and then I just cinch it in at the end. That's the look that I like better. I kind of like the baggy sleeves and then cinched versus doing a full taper all the way down. But if you've never done a granny square decrease, that's coming right up. So, while I know granny squares are probably the most common thing in crochet, there's a few things as far as doing this sleeve that are kind of important if you're trying to replicate a sleeve like this for yourself. And the first is how to join your rows. So you're always going to encounter 2 types of stitch joins, one or the other. So here I had a chain of 4 to start off, and I have this gap. So to actually make it look like a full granny cluster, you only need to do 2 double crochets into the space, and then you're going to find the third. So we have 1, 2, 3, and you're going to hook onto that through both loops is what I usually try to do. You can probably just do 1, and you're going to do a slip stitch. So you're going to yarn over, pull through, yarn over, pull through, and there's your last granny cluster of the row. So how do you start your next one? Well, you're going to go up, chain 3 is what I like to do, and then you're going to do 2 double crochets into that space. So when you get all the way around, you're then going to be slip stitching into this top chain here. So your 2 options, you're both going to be joining with a slip stitch in essentially the third chain. It just matters whether you have a full granny cluster to start or just chain 4, and that chain 4 represents 1 double crochet and 1 chain 1. The other thing, I'll show that a little bit better, is how to change colors. So what I like to do with this is, I'm a person, I put knots in my crochet. I don't really care for not having knots, especially when it's clothing, because I want to make sure it's actually going to be stable and secure. So with my yarn here, I'm going to make a slip stitch in whatever my new color is, and I'm going to get that relatively sized. But what I'm actually going to do, I shouldn't have pulled that tight quite yet, make that a little bit looser, easier to find, is right before I do that slip stitch to join this row, I'm going to put my yarn through, I'm going to hook my new yarn, I'm going to pull it through. And so while the stitch looks like it's fully joined in the correct color, now when I chain to start my next row, I'm in my new color. So, and then you just continue with your row like normal. So let me go all the way around, and then I'll show you how to join this end and how that chain 4 actually starts. So here I am with the last granny cluster of this row. Here's my first one there. So you're just going to chain 1, and again to that 1, 2, 3rd chain right here, you're going to capture both loops. That's what makes it a very seamless join. You're going to yarn over and pull through and pull through. That's a nice slip stitch to join. So then to start this next row, if I can keep this in frame, I'm going to chain 1, 2, 3, 4. And so the reasoning for 4, almost every project is going to have you start with some chain that is approximate, trying to represent a stitch. You can either do 2 or 3 to represent a double crochet. For this, I've found that 3 works nicely. It just gives you a consistent point to attach it to. You could also, if you were choosing to do 2 to represent 1 double crochet, you would only then chain 3 here to move on, because it's essentially the representation of your double crochet plus 1 to be that chain space that's the gap between all of our granny clusters. And so then you just skip over that one below it and you proceed like normal. The other thing that you know, most people like to do when they make a sleeve is have it taper a little bit. So how do you do a granny square decrease? This was really interesting to me when I first learned, because most times, like an invisible decrease, you just go into the front loops of the stitches and then boom, you have less stitches. But for a granny square cluster, we don't want to disrupt this pattern. And so a granny square cluster decrease actually takes 2 rows to complete. The base row, let's say I wanted to put one right here, is I'm going to just, as I accidentally capture the white, let's say I want to put one right here. I'm going to only do 1 double crochet in the space. And then I'm just going to proceed like normal around the row. And for the sake of time, I'm going to demonstrate this concept with a different strand of yarn just right here, so that I don't have to go all the way around the row, because this is not actually where I want a decrease right now. So let's pretend I was starting a new row and that I was starting it from this 3rd chain space. So if my slip knot would tighten, that'd be super helpful. There we go. Pull that through. We're gonna start this off as if it was normal, do my 3 chain. You know, we're just pretending I'm coming around the row again, even though I'm definitely not. So, now that you're here, you've done your preceding cluster. You notice this is where you were going to do a decrease. Now, you're still going to make 3 double crochets, but they're just not all going into 1 chain space. So, you're going to do 1 into this chain space, 1 into this stitch, and then your last one into this chain space. So, what that looks like, I have my chain right there. I'm going to do 1 double crochet into the first space. I'm going to do 1 double crochet into this stitch, and then I'm going to do 1 double crochet into the second chain space. Then you chain 1 and you continue like normal. And so what you see is you now, while you think this might look visually disruptive, I promise you, in large-scale projects, it's actually incredibly hard to see this point of decrease, because the point is that it hides it very, very well. So notice where we should have had 2 granny clusters, we now just have 1. So we have done a decrease, and as you go on, if you include many of these, you'll notice your project start to narrow or taper for the sleeves. So that's the other and last key concept as far as how I put these sleeves together, is a granny square decrease. And I will attempt to keep track of where I put them in the sleeve pattern, but it's not super obvious. And if you have a good eye, you can see that chain of joins right here, because it looks like there's those stitches stacked on top of each other. But overall, it's very hard to see where that seam is, especially if you're looking at the project from far away. So that's how you join your 2 different types of rows, change color, and do a decrease in your granny square stitches. And that's honestly all you need to know to be able to put this kind of a sleeve together.
So there is one more thing when it comes to finishing out these sleeves. So you get your sleeve to the length you want. There's the end as it falls off the table, super helpfully. You can see there's a few decreases along the way, which is how the sleeve tapers out, but I don't personally like wide sleeves. If you do, you are more than welcome to just leave it like this and boom, ta-da, sleeve is done. But I personally prefer tighter cuffs around my wrists, and so what we're going to do is make that happen. You could just make this a taper all the way down to that, but I don't really like that. I think it can get a little constricting. So what I prefer is to essentially finish it like this. So I'm going to show you how you get from there to here. So when you finish your last thing, so I've got my slip stitch right here, and so I'm going to chain 1. And so the following bit kind of entirely depends on how many stitches you have and how tight you want your cuff. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit, make this nice and easy. So what I have found is alternating between 2 and 3 crocheted together. So we're going to do a round of single crochets, but we're going to do some things together. So what that means is I'm going to pick up a bunch of loops. So I'm going to pick up a loop here, then I'm going to go into the next stitch and pick up a loop here. And so that's 2. I have 2 stitches, so I have 3 on my hook. This was my starting one, and here's the 2 I've picked up. I'm going to do this first one as a 3 together. So I'm going to pick up a loop here. So now I have 4.
I'm going to yarn over one more time and pull through all the loops on my hook. And notice those are all cinched. So this next one, I'm going to do a few two together. So pull up one loop, and I'm only going into the front loops of these stitches. So each stitch is a chevron. You're only going to go into that front loop. It just makes it a little bit easier. This can also be called an invisible decrease. So you just kind of want, this may take a little bit of trial and error depending on your project and the desired tightness. I also like to make sure that I have these really, really tight, because it's not helping, and here I'm doing a 3, it's not helping me at all if I'm doing these nice and loose, because then it's not really combining them, is it? So you're just going to kind of keep doing that around, and you can see this now, I'm creating the circumference that I want. So if you end up noticing it's getting too tight, you can either just switch to single crochets. That might result in some weirdness of how it cinches, or just undo a few, put some single crochets in instead of the double or triple together. So this part, there is no exact stitch count. I'm just going to kind of go around and make sure it looks about what it's supposed to. And I will show you what that looks like. Okay, and so my last two to crochet together, there's one, and then I do believe it's that chain space right there. And then to join this together, I'm going to go here and call that definitely good. And we're going to do a slip stitch to join. So now, and you always want to test it to make sure it's going to be a good size and at least that your hand can get through. Now what I like to do, so slip stitch, we're going to chain one to just go to that next row. I think there's 2 rows of single crochet here before I do this joined color row. And so what I did there is I just used a strand of the blue and a strand of the gray to finish off the cuff, because I didn't like the look of it ending just in white. So I'm going to do those 2 rows, and then we'll come back and I'll show you how to deal with this. Okay, so I actually think after comparing these 2 sleeves that it's just 2 rows total, as in the 1 row to cinch everything together and then 1 row of single crochet. Alright, so I've done my slip stitch to join my rows. I'm going to chain 1 and find a pair of scissors. And I'm going to cut an amount off. So notice I'm not doing the color change like I showed previously, and there's kind of sort of a reason. This is just a little bit more difficult to deal with. So the kind of fun thing about this cuff is it lets me use a scrap. So this is just a random scrap of the blue yarn that I have from elsewhere on this project. So I've got an end of my blue yarn and an end of my gray yarn, and I'm going to make a slip knot with both of them together an amount of the ways down. I tend to leave stupid long tails, but that's because I like to have a good bit for weaving in things, because, I don't know, I'm always afraid things are going to go wrong. So how I like to insert it is I like to actually go into the loop first and then pull that first bit through. I don't know why, I just always think this sits a little bit nicer. So now I'm going to chain 1 to go up, and then this is really, I'm just going to single crochet like normal. However, what I'm going to try to do is capture all 3 of these tails along the cuff as I go. It's going to make finishing it easier, and it kind of works for weaving it in. So go into the stitch, notice all 3 of my tails are sitting on top of the stitch, grab both of my yarn and pull through, yarn over, and pull through. And so all 3 of my tails are going to get captured as we go. And this is just single crochet. And I think this is a super cute way to, again, tie in most of the colors from this project and also secure your ends as you go. If at any point in your crochet projects you have the ability to just crochet over your ends, I highly recommend doing it, because it's just a really easy way to work things in, and then you don't have tails to weave in later. With granny squares it gets a little bit harder because I don't like having the floating yarn going across the top, basically the bottom of the stitches, so I leave those to weave in like here. But when you get the chance, I like doing it this way because I think it makes a much simpler time later on. So there's my last stitch, and here is my first chain. So we're going to get under all of those wonderful strands of yarn eventually. Somehow convince the hook to pull it all through. Whoop, don't pull the knot through if you can avoid it. And then we're going to just chain 1. And look, we almost ran out of our blue, but that's okay because we have plenty left. And you want to get that knot to sit nice. and flush. So you will still have 2 ends to weave in, but now you don't have five. Yes, 5. I can do math. And so there are the 2 ends of my sweater.
So we might have done something. Oh god, okay. Things are on the floor, like usual. Okay, so we're in the bathroom just because I need to be able to tell whether or not this is cute, and while I'm filming this, because otherwise I will probably not film this if I can't do these at the same time. So we're having a moment. So sleeves are done. I'm actually pretty happy with these sleeves. I think they look super cute. I think they fall at the right point. They're a little puffy. They kind of go flat at the end, but like that's fine. I'm having an interesting, it doesn't necessarily sit on my shoulders the way I thought, and so this is where I think the next part is going to be super important. I also don't know face and frame. I want to create vertical, basically supports. I'm going to slip stitch on the inside so you can't see them from the outside, but I need to make sure that I have enough here in order to make that happen. Because I kind of like the curve back in the front. The back is cute. Regardless of anything else, the back of this thing is going to be cute. But we're at a point, I got to figure out what I'm doing next. I've discovered that certain cardigans just look better with different shirts, so let's try it with this. This is closer to a shirt. This is probably the shirt that I would likely wear this with. Again, in frame or not, who knows. See, I feel like the neckline looks better when it's with a shirt like this. Still think it might be, I think a leaf there will help that kind of be more similar, and that's coming in, so that'll follow the same cut to kind of the center and then down. I think this part, I think here is fine. I think I have some work to do up the top because I think it's sitting further back on my shoulders than I anticipated. So, but I do think I'm missing 2 more leaves, but I mean, we're getting pretty close. So I'm really excited, and oh my god, all right, let's put on 2 more leaves and then start putting some supports in. So we'll see if I decide to change my plan. I was originally going to hang it up on my dress form and do it that way, but then I realized I might deal with some weird stretching and also lying on the ground uncomfortably, so I'm going to try to do it here instead. I think I just might make straight lines, and I'm going to be doing it in this gray color so that it's the neutral kind of back to everything, so when you actually look through, if you see it in the gaps, it's not super visible. So I'm just going to start from the bottom. I've got this leaf right here, and this is the center back-ish, so I'm going to do 1 up the center back, and we're going to see how that goes. I think I'm literally just going to start from this point on this leaf, actually probably about here, because that seems to be a major point of joints, and just go as straight up as I can. So we'll see how that goes.
This is just a top-down shot of me working on the slip stitch process. Certain parts were a little bit difficult because, I mean, I was trying to get into parts of stitches that you're not usually supposed to crochet into, and I chained some extra stitches in those gaps or when I couldn't find an easy stitch to get to. So not every stitch is a slip stitch, some of them are chains, but I was really just trying to go from one end to the top, and when I got to the top, I went horizontal, and then I came back down. So I made this zigzag pattern all the way up and down across the top. And the only rule I had was I wanted at least 2 lines per flower, so that way I could secure as many petals as possible to ensure the highest amount of stability.
So this is just a sanity check for myself. I've done half, oh my god, I know it looks like a mess. I've done half of the ribbing. This is about the center back-ish. And I've done vertical ribbing across this half, and I just want to point out like the visual difference between like this rose and this one. You see how much more flat and how everything like sits together versus the roses on this side that I haven't are just kind of all over the place and with no shape. So the fact that these look pretty dang good to me is the justification I need to spend another 3 hours doing the other side. Yeah, all of these, this so far has taken me like 3 hours to do, and so that means the second half will take me another 3 hours, but fingers crossed it is going to be worth it. I'm also considering, due to, you can kind of see the stress at these joints, I think I'm going to add a few vertical ones just at the top of the sleeve here to really support that, because this is pretty heavy and again, very limited attachment points. That's kind of my biggest concern with all of this. But like, the finish line is in sight. I say that and I still have to do the whole hem on the inside and the outside. But like, we're not gonna pay attention to that right now. We're gonna pay attention to the fact that the ribbing actually works and seems to be giving it a lot more support, and I think it's just gonna make it look overall like 10 times better. So 3 hours down, a lot more to go.
This is just the other angle of the slip stitches I did, which was 3 back and forths on the shoulders to try to reinforce that seam. Shoulder seams are notorious even when you create sewing projects for needing a lot of structural support, so I wanted to ensure that this thing is not going to fall apart, because I've actually kind of fallen in love with it, so it would be quite a shame if it fell apart.
So, I have done the entire internal support structure. I have flipped it right side out again so you can't see it, but if you'll notice, now the flowers all kind of hang pretty much flat. Things still need to be woven in. We're going to get to that. But for the most part, there's a lot better shape and structure to everything, and it kind of lays, there's, still bits that aren't connected, but it lays a little bit flatter and more like an actual fabric. Yeah, you can see some of the, oh, that's just a strand, some of the chain sections in the inside. I don't think that's a bad thing, honestly. I mean, that's why I tried to do it in the neutral color, so there's some bits that are just going to be a little visible, and we're accepting that and going with it. So, I also did a few passes over the shoulders, just because my biggest concern with this is not that crochet isn't strong, it's that these are a bunch of different types of yarn, all with different stretch and like stiffness, and then also there's so few attachment points all over the place. Some of these are not attached by very many places, and I was a little concerned about the stability. Hopefully when I add the hem, the outside will have a really nice structure to it as well. And then also I think the supports give just these flowers a little bit more shape, and they're not as all over the place and distorted. So I think it hangs a lot better now that it's got that internal boning and structure kind of in there. And I am going to build up the inner hem now. I'm going to do this the same way I did the sleeves, except nothing is going to get slip stitched. Everything is going to be at least a single crochet. And I think I'm going to do something similar to how I did the sleeves, where I think I'm going to do the first row in the white, and then I'm going to do a subsequent row in a mix of the blue and the gray to kind of bring that all together. I think that'll look really, really cute. So without further ado, I'm going to torment myself and take a stab at doing that. I just want to say, before I finish this segment, I honestly didn't think I was going to get to this point of being almost done with it. We're not going to talk about weaving in the ends right now. We're going to get to that. But I didn't know that it was going to get to this point, and I'm really, really happy that it has, and I can't wait to see what the final product's going to be.
It's a shame this footage is so long because I don't really have that much to add. It's the exact same process that I went through for creating the sleeve, except I didn't slip stitch anything. Everything was either a single, half double, or double crochet because I wanted to make sure that the edging was super, super consistent. I noticed that some of the slip stitches resulted in the edge looking a little weird. But I just went all the way around trying to build it up. I again kept it on my dress form because I was trying to fight gravity to the best of my ability. I didn't want to artificially induce stretch or tension into the gaps between these motifs when there wasn't anything there. I wanted to try to keep it as true to size as possible, and in my opinion, the best way to do that was have it hanging how it would actually be worn. Now, this was not easy. This was an absolute nightmare. My back hurts so much from bending over this stupid mannequin for, I think it took me at least 30 minutes for the first row. But once I had the first row completely done, I was able to do a just very consistent row of single crochets all the way around to finish out the second row to give it a little bit of a white border before I went in with the true trim. I don't have any footage of that, but I just did the exact same thing I did for the sleeves. So I crocheted with both the blue and the gray thread, doing double crochets all the way around to finish off the trim, and I think it looks so, so good.
So here she is. I'm really happy with it. The sleeves ended up, I think I could have done them a little bit shorter, but like that's fine. You know, it doesn't meet in the center. It's not designed to be like a buttoned up cardigan. It's supposed to be like a decorative sweater, so that's why the sides kind of swoop. Is the edge a little funky? Yeah. This thing is actually surprisingly warm for how holey it is, so that's a plus because I get so cold so quickly. But I'm really, really happy with it. I think it came out really good. Better than my wildest expectations. one of the decisions I'm very thankful for is that I did not continue this pattern on the sleeves. I think this would have been completely given up on. I think it probably would have just gotten burned in a fire pit somewhere, because it would have been a lot. But we got here, we're done. I think it looks really, really good. I'm just really happy it's finally complete, and I can't wait to wear it. Now, we're not going to talk about the fact that there's still a bunch of ends to weave in, but we'll get there, you know, with all due time, labor of love, all that jazz, something along those lines. But if you got to this point in the video, thank you so much for making it through. I know this one was quite a doozy, so I appreciate you sticking around. Please hit subscribe if you enjoyed. Help out the channel. Stick around. It'd be much appreciated. You can go ahead and like it if you enjoyed the rambles. Otherwise, leave a comment. Tell me what you think. I didn't think it was going to get here, but we got here, and I'm super, super happy. So thank you so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one. Bye!